Welcome everyone to WOR Tier 3, and we are racing around Zandvoort tonight. I am Darkness, and it will just be me this evening. For this race, we do have ourselves a full lobby, so this will be very exciting to see what these drivers can do around such a fun circuit. A lot of I've seen a lot of talk that people do enjoy this circuit. Though, there can be some curbs that can be quite deadly, so it'll be interesting to see which of these drivers is going to be the first to have an issue with it, or who's going to be the first to chuck it on pole and be able to work with the flows of this track. Very tricky circuit, but I look forward to see what we have in store. 18 drivers on the grid today, and this will be the full grid. I'm not aware of any more drivers to join. We've got Alfa Romeo to be the first driver out. Let's have a look. That's going to be Ryan. On average, lap times, or I say on average, sorry, but lap times, I suspect, or I'm expecting to see lap times around about the 1:08 mark for a circuit like this. 1:07 would be mighty impressive, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get a few drivers into the 1:07s, but 1:08 is my ballpark for what we'll see in this qualifying session. Unfortunately, we've not got one Red Bull and one Williams, so they'll have the joy of not having to worry about double stacking when diving into the pits. There were 16 minutes remaining of the qualifying. Over to see with Ryan, he's coming through that second sector. This is a nice left-hand. You've got to be careful of the curb there. Second DRS on this circuit. Burning fuel to start his first hot lap. To finish the second sector, you come into a quick right-hander chicane to a long left-hander. This is 11 and then into 12. Right before you then have the DRS detection zone just here. And then as you approach into corner 13, you will see the DRS line just below the car there. And we go through the final banking and across towards the line. Ryan will be the first driver to cross the line for this qualifying session, so let's see what he can do for the provisional pole position lap into the first corner. Very, very close to the inside. Again, another curb that you really need to be careful. You don't want to mount it, especially not during the race, and you'll find yourself spinning out. Taking a very narrow line into the third corner. Heavy banking. A lot of drivers you'll see a lot of drivers going for different racing lines into that third corner and finishing the first sector with a 23.899, an incredible start, considering my provisional idea was a 24.0. So just 1/10 quicker than what I expected. Now into the second sector. Quick left-hander, very wide left, quick right-hander, very wide left-hander now to the second DRS straight. And he does have a driver ahead of him. Hopefully he does not get in the way during his first hot lap. Now at the end of the second sector, a 47.5. Now the left, the right, then the left. And now he's just got the final few corners to finish out the first hot lap of this session. Here comes 13, here comes 14 now. And to the line, taking the quickest route to the line. And he will set a provisional pole time of a 1:08.289. And that is an incredible first lap, and we're going to have to see who's going to be the next driver to cross the line. It's going to be the Mercedes with a 1:46. And the times will start to tumble quite quickly. Drivers now putting in, we got the Red Bull with a 1:08.4, AlphaTauri 1:08.6, and the Aston Martin with a 1:08.2. The times may remain, I say, fairly high. Sixton with a 1:08.0, an incredible lap, and I saw him last week racing around Spain, and I know he's a very quick driver, so I want to certainly keep an eye on, as the Alfa Romeo driver is now the first person to put it up into the 1:07s, or 1:07.9. I did say it was going to be expected, and he puts it in for his first lap. As I was saying, the times will tumble as the session goes on, because the track will start to ramp up, grip will increase, and drivers will be able to put in much quicker times, as we have our second driver to put it in for a 1:07. That's Mark with the Ferrari, a 1:07.960. And we're going to watch the Haas now come towards the line. He's going to cross it with a 1:08.5. So far, we have everyone within a second of each other. Sorry, the top 15 drivers all within a second of each other. Still to put in a lap, we've got Tim in that McLaren. He's coming through that final few corners now. His teammate was just behind him. Potentially going for a second lap. I'm not too certain. No, this teammate's going into the pits, but he's going to cross the line with a 108.349 for the McLaren, with his teammate in 14th place, a 108.554. We have the Alpine still. He's coming through that first sector. Now we saw a 23.899. He puts in a 23.860. So a 3/100th improvement on our previous pole sitter, our initial pole sitter, which was Ryan Grob for the Alfa Romeo. Now coming through that second sector, you got the long right-hander, then the long left-hander. And we're able to see down the second DRS straight, what will his second sector time be? Is it going to be a purple back-to-back for the Alpine driver? It is a 47.5 for the blue and pink car. Now coming around, he's got 2 corners to go to set a beautiful lap. And in that pink and blue car, set a purple final sector and get to the top of the timing sheet. His teammate, currently in P3 with a 108.2, he crosses the line with a 108.3. Unfortunately, not finding the time in that final sector, but still an incredible first and second sector, finding himself 1/100th of a second slower than Tim Alders in P9. The last driver to set a lap, we've got Ivan for Aston Martin. Purple first sector, finds himself an 800th of an improvement on our previous driver that we just spectated. That was Elliott, I believe, in the Alpine. So now coming through to the second sector, we're going to see, can he improve on what was it, a 48 or a 47.5? 47.3, so 2 or a 1.5 improvement on the Alpine driver. And if he can keep this up in that third sector, hopefully my timings are right, my math is right, and we're going to see a new driver at least in the top 10, or perhaps on the top spot, crosses the line into the top 6, just ahead of his teammate with a 108.148, 2/1000ths of a second slower than the Mercedes driver ahead of him, Tommaso, with a 108.146. Incredibly close between the two drivers, but this is what we're expecting to see. All of these drivers are very skilled, very good at this game, and these are the lap times I'm expecting to see. If we have a quick look at the gaps between everyone, we have just 8 tenths. 8 tenths between P1 and P2, 2/100ths between P1 and P2. So Ben, just 8 tenths off the pace for pole position. Can he find the pace in his next lap, or will someone else be the one to find that pace? Are we going to see a lap improvement as well? It'll be interesting to see if anyone can improve to a 107.8, which I believe would then be the next mark. We'll have to see what the drivers can do, and we're going to see Mark finish his outlap. He's burnt his fuel, he's let some drivers through. Now he's going to start his second hot lap of the session. Currently sitting with a provisional P2, as I said, just 18/1000th of a second behind P1. And now let's see what he can do in the Ferrari. Beautiful red Ferrari. Coming into that third corner, going for a very tight line. Indeed, the fastest line as you find the most traction going down the inside. And now with the Mercedes letting him by, he's going to come through and finish the first sector with a 1:23.833. Not bad first sector, sorry, but still just off the pace. Perhaps he can find some time in the second and third sector. A little hesitant on the throttle there. He did just go slightly wide, perhaps finding a bit more time on the edges of the track. Now coming through that second sector across the line, he gets a 1:47.3, sorry, with a purple middle sector. So he certainly found the time, but then with a slight snap of the rear there, he might have lost a little bit of time. But now coming through the 14th corner, DRS is now wide open, and now to the line. He's going to abandon that lap and perhaps come out with a fresh set of softs. So now we've got the majority of the grid, if not the entire grid, out on a lap. Let's have a quick look through the order. Candy King, he's going to come round 13, now 14. His teammate just ahead of him, perhaps just not too close Not close enough to improve with a toe, but he still crossed the line. Just 1/1000th of a second behind his teammate. I don't know if that's fortunate or unfortunate, but now we're going to see Thomas go for a flying lap. Can he improve on his teammate just behind him, or is he going to not improve and perhaps give an opportunity to someone else to take 6th place? So Mercedes 6-7, Ferrari 2-5, Aston Martin 8-10. Those are the only 3 teams with 2 drivers in the top 10. Very wide lines that second sector. As we have Sixton crossing the line for P2. An incredible lap by the Alpine driver, the Williams driver, sorry, with a 107.946, 5/1000ths of a second off a P1. But here, as we watch with Tomas, he's going to finish his next qualifying lap as Tim Bayer has retired from this session. What can the Mercedes man do? Improve by how much? He improves by 7/100ths of a second, takes 5th place, and extends that lead to his teammate in P7. Leo appears to be on a hot lap. He's going through the second sector now. His teammate, in fact, is just behind. He's going to back out of it. So perhaps was there some team games there? Let's see what Ryan can do in this second sector, keeping it very tidy now. Second DRS straight as Tim Alders is now retired from the session. He's retired, in fact, after a collision on the circuit. You can see his dot there on the minimap in that third sector. Ryan with a 7/100th of a second improvement. Now coming into the third sector, it's just these 2 final corners. Can he keep it together and improve? Can he find himself into that top 10? Just an improvement of 4/100th of a second and he'll find himself in that top 10. And he's already got double that. Now across the line, he's going to put in a 108.232 and finds himself exactly in that top 10. Just missing out 11th place by 15/1000ths of a second. So an incredible lap so far from the Alfa Romeo driver. Having a look through the order, a few drivers are currently out, but not a lot of them are setting times. I think Elliott's just starting a lap. He's got very little ERS compared to many other drivers who start their lap, or perhaps this is what is ideal. Now going through that third corner, all sticking as close to the edge of the grass as they can. You need to take as much of the track space as possible. Puts in a 111,000th of a second improvement in our first sector. So currently on for a provisional top 12, going very wide on the curb there, perhaps losing a little bit of his car. He keeps it just under control now. He's got the second sector to complete, DRS wide open. He's got a driver ahead of him out of the way, so no toe there. And now to finish the second sector, still a 1/10th improvement. If he keeps up a 1/10th improvement, he can find himself potentially up into the top 12 places. So 4 positions gained just by a 1/10th improvement. And if he finds even more time, he might find himself in the top 10. What can the Alpine driver Elliott do? Cross the line. It's going to be a 108.214, even further into the top 10. And his teammate is actually just behind him. And I think, yeah, he wasn't improving in that third sector. We'll now dive into the pits. And the only driver currently on a lap, we've got Presmek. I'm going to stick with Hubba. I do apologize if I pronounce anyone's name incorrect. I do try my best to pronounce him. He's got himself a 3/1000th of a second slower than previous lap time in that first sector. So he needs to find himself some time in the second and third sector if he has any hopes to improve and find himself out of the bottom 4 drivers. Finishing that second sector, a 47.5, so not, it's a decent middle sector, but unfortunately still 5/100th of a second slower than his previous lap time. The question is, though, can he find the time in this third sector, or is he going to ditch this lap? And I think he is going to ditch this lap and find himself a fresh set of softs to finish out the session. 3.5 minutes remaining, And every driver but Elliott is currently out, but I think Elliott will be looking to go into the pit as well in low fuel mode. In fact, there you go, you can actually see the drivers coming out. We've got Tomas already out, he's the first driver ahead of everyone else. F1 is also out in the Red Bull. And we have a Aston Martin of Ivan, and currently sitting in P8. As our current pole leader, our current pole sitter, sorry, Leo for the Alfa Romeo, is also now out. So drivers are slowly starting to leak out of the pits, giving themselves plenty of time and gap ahead and behind, but also burning the fuel. You can see with their throttle and brake, 100% throttle and about 10 to 15% brakes, you can find yourself burning a lot of fuel, as well as high revs. High revs was the key in the last game, in the F1 2022 game. Whereas now in F1 23, it is throttle and brakes to burn fuel. We're going to start to see them now weaving, try and warm up those tyres, trying to burn the fuel. And let's have a look at Tomas, because he is the driver. No, he isn't anymore. F1 Kid has gotten through. He's been let through by the Mercedes driver. We're going to see the Red Bull be the first to cross the line for potentially what will be, or in fact not potentially, will be the final lap of qualifying. So what can the Red Bull do for their final lap? Currently sitting in 9th place, so 108.163. Just shy of 8th place by just 15 thousandths of a second. Very steady first sector, 1.5 tenths exactly improvement in that first sector, purple first sector, but I'm certain that time will start to tumble down as other drivers cross the line. Let's have a jump back through to Tomas, who's coming through the second sector. These drivers are very quick. They don't need that much space ahead of them in order to, before they have a risk of catching up to the driver ahead. So now crossing that middle sector line, it's a 1/10 improvement for the Red Bull, and it's going to be a 75/1000th of an improvement for the Mercedes. So now we're going to see two drivers come around the final corner, and who's going to find the most lap time? In effect, the Red Bull is going to have a small bit of a tow here, just a little bit, and we'll cross the line now with a 108.5. A 108.0. As Tomas will be next across the line, doesn't find any lap improvement, is actually now demoted down to 7th place. As Ivan crosses the line, a 108.016, beating Deja, the Alpine driver, by just 6/1000 of a second. In fact, the Alpine driver is on a lap going through the first sector, improves by 4/100ths of a second. It just goes just a bit wide, unfortunately, coming into that second sector, into the gravel, and that is going to be the lap over for them. Now trying to get out of the way for passing competitors. There goes the McLaren. I believe that will then be Hassith coming through towards the end of the second sector now, as we have Max retiring from the session. So 1/10 improvement for the McLaren driver. So we see an improvement by someone. Unfortunately, I didn't quite see who it was who crossed the line. I think it was the Haas driver, Huber, with a 108.015. Sixton crossed the line, a 107.920. Now here comes the McLaren, promoted up to 10th place, a 108.105. What is this qualifying session? Everyone is so mighty quick. Candy King up. Actually, Candy King has finished their lap. We've got Elliott coming around, finishing their lap into the pits. Rene coming across the line now to finish qualifying. Does not find any lap improvement, and that is qualifying. Mark, our qualifying leader, with a 107.833 and a 107.920 for P2 for Sixton, and a 107 again 942. So we've got just under a tenth splitting the top three. In fact, there you go. just over a tenth, sorry, my math is a bit bad. 1/10 and 8,000ths of a second splitting the top 3. That is some incredible driving by everyone, and I am absolutely impressed. But now, with just a moment to go, we will have the race. 36 laps around this circuit. Safety car is on, formation lap is off. As many of us know, there are plenty of bugs right now in the game, and unfortunately, formation lap is one of those things. So, that is the end of qualifying. And in just a few minutes, we will be jumping into that race. Five red lights. And away we go. Feel free to mention out who you think your predictions are for this race. Because, honestly, I don't know who to predict. I've seen Sixten win a race before. I know that Deha is quite quick. And unfortunately, a lot of these drivers are new names and faces to me that I do not know if they're going to be able to beat. In fact, I've just noticed something, and I didn't see this in qualifying. We have 2 drivers with the exact same time, Thomas and Stefano, with exactly a 108.173. Both of them with the same lap time. But unfortunately, I believe it was Tomas with the lap time first. He will then take the leading position for qualifying between the 2 of them. As we get ready, drivers have a 161 sprint to the first corner, to which the inside line is certainly the dominant line. However, going round the outside, there is enough of a banking on that first corner. There's enough of a camber on that first corner to give the front tyres enough grip, and you can make a move around the outside. So, typically, the inside line is the dominant one for the lead of the race, but we won't know till we approach the second corner to truly understand who has managed to maintain the lead of the race, or who has capitalized on such a beautiful start and can take P1. This is a high tyre degradation track, so we are going to see a lot of one-stoppers, potentially two-stoppers in the race. And this is also a high fuel consumption circuit. If drivers are not careful, and we have no safety cars, there is that potential where a lot of them will have to lift and coast to try and preserve that fuel. 14 corners around the circuit, all very high speed. Only one that requires you to gear down almost to second gear, although it's not ideal under race conditions. And only 2 DRS zones. You got that first main straight, which won't be activated for the first 2 laps. That second one again for the first 2 laps. Now 5 red lights and away we go. And let's have a see as how our drivers are doing. Mark with an excellent start right off the way, or right off the start. The Williams could not quite get it up there. Same with the Alfa Romeo. A little bit of a tussle going on. You got the Alfa Romeo and the Williams trying to go too wide. The Alpine and the Aston Martin as well up in the lead of the race. Currently going too wide. A lot of drivers going too wide. The Alpine, so the Mercedes and the Ferrari going too wide to the third corner. A lot of drivers really risking it on the first lap, trying to go as far as they can. If we have a quick look at the tyre strategies, it's a nice split between the hards and the mediums. And I think all those too wide drivers have now settled into their positions. I say that as we see the McLaren Tim Alders trying to go for a move. He's got the outside line now of the Haas. And if he can stick it around both of them on the same compound tyre, the Alpine and the Aston Martin just behind as well. And the McLaren is through, but the Aston Martin, can Tim find his way up in, or is the Haas going to fight back? Tim currently in 13th and 14th place, but Max in the Haas is trying to threaten a position there. Fortunately, not quite close enough. Now we're going to cross the line. Mark still in the lead of the race. Sixten trying to go for a move on, Leo trying to go for a move on the Williams. Mark maintains the lead of the race for the first lap. Top 2 on the mediums, then 2 hards, 3 mediums, 5 hards, and then a nice pattern of medium hard to the end of the grid. So one-stoppers are quite likely for the rest of the grid, but this is dynamic weather. Who knows what's going to be predicted? Because I don't. I would love to know if there's rain predicted, because this track is certainly an exciting one with rain. Drivers are starting to settle in properly in their positions. It's going to take a couple laps of those hards to truly warm up. Those mediums, perhaps, though, they've managed to fire up quite quickly in that first lap. So we see Candy King and Tim Alders trying to go too wide now into that second sector. Sorry, now coming down towards the third sector. Apologies for that confusion. Coming down towards that chicane, quick right-hander, then a left-hander, and Tim Alders remains ahead in this battle. But here comes the Aston Martin now. Tim Bayer wanting to have a piece of this battle, along with the Haas. The Haas is not out of it. Max is still right on the cusp of this battle and is trying to wait. And there it is, possible strategies. One stop for soft medium, but realistically, it's going to be medium hard or hard medium for the rest of the grid. No one has started on the soft, as you see Tim Alders defending to the inside line, and the Aston Martin also defending to the inside line. Tim Bayer with a good defensive move there. Now it's just a matter of time. When a driver's going to pounce, when a driver's going to wait, the end of this lap, the DRS will be enabled. This will allow drivers to open up that rear wing. Therefore, as the name suggests, reducing the drag. It increases the number of overtakes, cutting the gap down to the driver ahead, or increases the opportunity to attempt the fastest lap. Of course, you can score an additional point as we have Tim Bayer spinning out in that second sector. Unfortunately, now down to last place. We have a battle for P13. The Haas and the McLaren still fighting at it, now into corner 12, and I think there was some light contact between the two of them, but still very clean nonetheless, and Tim remains ahead. Those mediums, well, it makes no difference in this fight, as they both have those mediums, and it's a massive now DRS train all the way up and down through the grid. Sixton still in P3, Ivan in P4, Deha in P5. I did see a couple drivers attempt to go too wide down that main straight. Unfortunately, no moves were made. But now a DRS train between 1st place and 12th place, 11th place, and 12th place to 17th place. Tim still trying to recover from that earlier contact or spin in that second sector. Very unfortunate start for Tim. He was fighting up there for 13th place with Tim as well. Now as we approach into that third sector, Mark continues to lead this race. He's got a 4.5 tenth gap now to the drivers behind him. He will not have any DRS. He will not be able to defend his position from the drivers behind, though he does have the preferred strategy at the start of this race, as the mediums will certainly have the pace for at least the next 7 more laps, before the hards really have the advantage over the medium runners now, as the rest of the grid starts across the line to start the 4th lap. There's a massive tussle going on for position at the back there. Unfortunately, I didn't quite catch it all. We've got the 2 AlphaTauris going for position. In fact, I think it was just Rene getting through ahead of his teammate. Now it is certainly starting to quieten down. It is going to see a lot of overtakes towards the end of the first stint, or if drivers make some errors. Beautiful helicopter cam here to see the Alpine Deha trying to close that gap down, but stuck in a DRS train. All of these drivers are stuck in a DRS train. Mark, with incredible pace so far, is able to keep them all behind and maintain a 4.5 tenth gap. This circuit is one you've got to be careful with, especially for your setup. The first sector is the best sector for having speed. Apologies. And you're going to see the Alfa Romeo start to close that gap down. That's where the speed is really powerful. That back straight and then a few relative straight in that first sector, but that comes to the second and third sector. That's where you need the downforce and you need the grip. Your front end tires, your rear end tires really need to stick to the ground. You need to maintain those temperatures. If they get too high, you run the risk of losing a lot of grip, and coming out of a lot of these corners, especially the downhill or uphill corners, you will find yourself potentially spinning, or at least with a massive snap of oversteer. That is not what you want. These drivers are keeping it very clean so far, and it is very impressive to see. Ferrari teammate to race leader Stefano currently sitting in P7 at the mid-pack of this train. In fact, closing that gap down to the Haas ahead of him. Huber is now under pressure, relatively speaking, from Stefano, but couldn't quite close that gap down. These drivers need to be careful with their ERS as well. This is a circuit that really, it's not great for anything. It kills your tires, it kills your fuel. You cannot regain any ERS around this circuit, or at least it can be very difficult. And here we go, we're going to see the Alfa Romeo again. He's closing that gap down, he's closing it down quickly, but he isn't able to make the move, or in fact, maybe he's not going for the move. Trying to perhaps wait for the tires to really start to drop off, but we just have ourselves a beautiful train at the moment going through the first sector. Now coming to the end of the first sector, and the fastest lap, if we have a quick look at who has the fastest lap, it is P2 with a 1:11.2, the early stages of this race. We have ourselves a bit of a fight now between Tim and Elliot. Unfortunately, just missing the end of it. Tim Alders down to P14. Elliot getting through on those hard compound tires, perhaps not able to maintain the temperature. Of course, when you are in a DRS train, it's all well and good and you can conserve fuel. You can help regain your ERS behind it, but it does nothing good for your tires. Your tires will start to overheat, and that is where the danger is. We're going to see Dacha now trying to go for a move down the inside. He had the DRS advantage, and the Aston Martin does go a bit wide, but has a good enough exit and maintain the lead in this battle. P4 still for Ivan, P5 for the Alpine. Alpine now looking to move, or at least was looking to go for a move down the inside. Not quite close enough, though, to make it stick. But if he can keep this up, stay within about 2 tenths, 1.5 tenths of the driver ahead of him into the second DRS straight, about 200 to 300 meter sprint with DRS, the potential to take the position is certainly there if you are that close, because you also get a toe. Toe is where the driver ahead of you is cutting the air already for you, and you get fresher air. So not fresh, sorry, not necessarily fresher, but certainly not as draggy air. But now finishing the first, or sorry, approaching the start of this first quarter. Leo continues to cut that gap down, not going for the move just yet. Very interesting tactic the Alfa Romeo driver has. And I'm curious to know what he's trying to do there, as we're going to see 2 wide between the AlphaTauri and the Haas into that first corner, now into the second, now approaching into the third corner. The AlphaTauri of Rene is now ahead. And unfortunately, Haas has lost a position. And perhaps we are in that little cut-off zone for the hard mediums already. If you cannot manage them, perhaps the hards are coming into the picture now. We'll have to see. We've got Sixton currently sitting in P2. Oh, sorry, P3. And Ivan in P4 on those hards. We'll be able to see from them. Is it going to be powerful in this changeover period now? Or is the changeover period still yet to come? Tim now really trying to look to close that gap down 2 tenths as they come around that final corner. He is going to be close enough, without a doubt, to attempt to move if he's got the ERS. We're going to jump on board with him. And he isn't using, he is saving that ERS. And in fact was losing some distance to the cars ahead of him. And the McLaren behind him was gaining a lot of time. And we now continue on our train through this circuit. As I mentioned, it is a very tricky circuit, but it's also a very luxurious circuit in the fact that you don't need to worry so badly. If you can keep up your pace, you keep up your consistency, you don't need to worry so much for dive bombs from behind. Your biggest opponent around this circuit is the fuel, and the ERS, the tires, and the strategies. Drivers on the hards are now going to start to feel the advantage that they have over the mediums, as the medium tire runners need to start thinking about what is their second stint going to be. will it continue to be, as we can see the Red Bull actually having some rear locking into that middle sector? Finally, a bit of action. We see the McLaren getting through, now going too wide with Elliott down into the 11th corner. He's got the inside line, but just has to maintain behind, yield the position to the Alpine. But now he has a bit of a recovery drive, as he was in the last point scoring position, and now coming around the final few corners is 2 positions shy of getting anything when he walks away from this race. So we have a spinner, our first driver to have an incident through that final sector, and unfortunately that is Rene's. We have a position change coming down the main straight. The Alpine, Deja and Huber going too wide into the first corner. Now Deja defending P5 beautifully on those medium compound tires, both of them on old medium tires. As we approach the, we are entering the second sector for the 11th time. Rene now in the pits. Of course, you saw the front wing damage. End plate was missing after a spin on that final corner. So onto the mediums for them already. Tim Bayer still, unfortunately, in P17 after a early spin in Sector 2. Now 13.5 seconds away. He was 3 seconds quicker. Oh, sorry, he was 10 seconds away from the pack, but unfortunately starting to fall away. The DRS train is really helping everyone stay and keep up with everyone else. And are we going to see a potential move? We're not going to see a potential move from anyone. The Ferrari tried to go for a move. There is a bit of contact there between the Ferrari, the Haas, and the Alpine ahead of him. And hopefully no damage given to any party there. As we see the Ferrari trying to go too wide now onto the inside. The Haas going onto the grass. And around the outside, the Ferrari with a beautiful corner. And unfortunately, that is going to be the Haas losing a lot of time now to the driver ahead of him. 8 tenths is the gap between him and the Ferrari. A beautiful move by Stefano. Unfortunate for Huber to go into the grass there. And there was a small contact between the 3 drivers into that first sector, but I think all of them came out unscathed, which is very fortunate indeed. But Stefano now leads the second DRS train, as it once was being led by Candy King, if I remember correctly. Now up to P6, a 1.5 second gap to the top 5. As they walk away with their battle. Alternating strategies, 3 medium runners and 2 hard compound runners, and we're going to now see the Ferrari, the first to pit in this session off of those mediums, and the Haas will now be the next marker for drivers to look to overtake. Can Ryan overtake now before the before the Haas opts to pit, get some extra DRS, extra tow, and potentially some help to defend the drivers behind? We'll have to see, as the Ferrari opts to go for the hard compound tyres, so looking to do the one-stop strategy, 23 laps on those hard tyres, which is certainly possible. 20 laps was my prediction for the longevity, or the life, of those tyres. Now it certainly is starting to quieten down on the track. You can see a lot of drivers just trying to keep within that DRS zone. It's drivers such as Ben, Max, all just sitting on the 8/10 gap to the drivers ahead of them. We're going to see Mark and Leo going too wide into that first corner. Leo going around the outside. As I mentioned, the banking is wide enough, steep enough to have the extra grip. And now Leo is our new race leader. As it looks for a moment there, Mark almost had a snap of oversteer. Fortunately, keeping the car well under control. Remains in P2, though. As I was saying, this is when the tyres are going to be a huge factor in these battles. Who's going to be the first to pit? We've already had Ferrari teammate Stefano in P17 now pit out of P6. Then who will be next? Leo, Mark, Deja, and Huber in the top 10 are the only drivers on the mediums. again for lap 14. Now crossing the line for lap 15. We're going to see Mark trying to go for a battle for P1. Down the inside, around the outside goes Leo. We've got a few more drivers pitting off of the mediums, but Leo continues to maintain the lead of this race. Tim and Alders, and Max into the pits. The McLaren and the Haas, sick of those medium tyres. Now onto the hards, and the medium runners now are Ben, Huber, Deha, Mark, and Leo. Leo trying to defend for the lead of the race at the moment, and defending beautifully indeed. Now rapidly approaching the second half of this race. 15 laps out of 36. 18 laps is our halfway mark. And how many of these drivers on the medium compound are going to look to do a one-stop to softs? I mean, the game did suggest a soft medium is certainly possible. But the question is it going to be a viable option when we see now Mark going through for the lead of the race down the inside on Leo? Ben now in the pits off of those mediums. The question is how far can you manage these tyres? 14 laps on the softs will find your tyres up into around about 60 to 70%, already risking your car, your tyres, to be into that puncture territory, and worse, losing a lot of grip around a circuit where you need the grip. It is vital, or you will find yourself pirouetting beautifully for the stream, but horribly for your race. Mark still into the second sector, leads with a 4.5, now 5/10 gap to P2. And we have a 17-second gap between Tim Alders and Candy King. And that time is going to just climb up the pecking order through these standings, through the timing sheet, as drivers start to pit. But the question is, when are the hard tyre runners going to pit? We have a yellow flag at the back of the grid, and I think we might have had a spin from one of the drivers who've just pitted. I think it might have been Ben in the AlphaTauri. There we go. We're going to have a few more Deha in the pits, Huber and Elliott in the pits, coming off of those coming off of those hards already. I think the two Williams, or the two Alpines, have double stacked, unfortunately losing a lot of time for the Alpine. But Elliott now on fresh mediums finds himself in P12 as Max crossed the line. New fastest lap on fresh hards, a 1:11.078. And our two drivers, the two drivers at the top, sister teams, Ferrari and Alfa Romeo, are still out on those mediums, and they surely must be crying by now as they come through with a half-second gap between P1 and P2 and a 3/10 gap between P3 and P2. And the question then is, or at least the question I'm asking, is what strategy are they going to go for? Because if they're going to go for the softs, that's going to be a daring drive to try and risk it for so long. How long before these tyres are going to hit that 70% region? How long before they hit puncture region? 75% on any tyre is puncture region, and there it is. In fact, we're going to see the Ferrari go in the pits, but not the Alfa Romeo. The Alfa Romeo back into the lead of the race, and Sixton continuing to close that gap down. 2.5 tenths, 3 tenths now to P1, and Ivan just outside of that fight. A 3-second gap between P3 and P4, as Tomas is trying to close it down to Ivan ahead of him. And it's just a battle for P3 with very little competition behind. Mark now coming out of the pits. He's going to come out just ahead of the Alpine driver pitting 1 lap ago. Maintains a net P1 after pit stops. Six tenths off of his previous best for Leo. And we're going to come round towards the 13th and 14th corner for the 18th time. And will this be the lap where he's going to pit onto those hard compound tyres? Or is he going to continue to extend this stint? he's going to cut the stint now. There he is into the pits, and Sixten will now take the lead of the race. We now have a new race leader. Our third race leader is Sixten, Ivan in P2, and now the two McLarens up in, sorry, the McLaren and the Red Bull, apologies, in P3 and P4, a 4-second gap between the top two and P3. Deha with a new fast lap, a 1:10.9, first of the 1:10.9. As we have a 1:10.5, sorry, a 1:09. I might be misreading that. I do apologize for my mistake there. 1 second gap nearly between P1 and P2, and now a solid 4-second gap between P2 and P3. So now starting to settle. The top 5 drivers still yet to pit, and Mark does still have that net P1, though will have a tyre disadvantage to the medium runners ahead of him as soon as they pit. And there goes the top 3 into the pits. F1 into the lead of the race. Our 4th race leader now is a Red Bull. And we see him up there with a 8/10 gap to P2. And Sixten is going in for the mediums, coming out of the pits already. A 1:10.4 exactly for Ryan, taking P6. Sixten coming out in P7. Actually going to get passed by Huber and potentially under pressure from the McLaren. But Ivan slots in that position just in time. So Sixten now onto P8. But he's got those fresher mediums now. And they're going to go on to the end of the race. 16 laps on the mediums are certainly possible. We've seen drivers already, the likes of the Haas and the Ferrari and the Alfa Romeo, go 18 laps on those mediums. So 16 laps is reasonable compared to them. But now the top 2 with a 10-second gap to the rest of the grid has to pit still. And the question is how much pace have they got left? Just 3.5 tenths off of their previous time for Candy King in that second sector. The question then is, have they managed to preserve the tyres enough that they keep going? I feel like I might just bite on my own words there, and they might dive to the pits. They are. That is going to be it. And unfortunately, a 3-second time penalty for F1 Kid for unfortunate corner cutting. Track limits. And now Mark will regain the lead of the race once again. We're going to see Leo just behind him taking P2 with that DRS advantage. And in fact, he's going to try and go for a move for P1 down the inside into that first corner. Banking around the outside is going to be a more effective route for the Ferrari. And that is where he's going to find that defending position. Now the inside line for the third corner. Coming round towards 4, 5, and 6 to finish out the first sector, sorry. And Mark remains in the lead. Deha in P3. All 3 on hard combat tyres. 1 lap old difference between the 3 of them. And Ryan right on their tail. He's got the mediums. He's certainly got the better strategy on paper. But the question is, in reality, does he have the pace, the ERS, the DRS, and the setup advantage, the fuel advantage to get ahead whilst those tyres are fresher and have a massive gain on the competition around him? Sixten right behind, 5 tenths behind on 1 lap old mediums. Now this is where the race will certainly start to ramp up. The competition will get exciting, and the overlaps, the overtakes are going to certainly start to ramp up. Now we're going to see 2 wide between the Alpine and the Alfa Romeo. Now for P3 and P4, the Alpine trying to go around the outside, but there it is, exactly as I said. The mediums, he's got to make them work, and he's got to make them work now. And now up into P3, it's an Alpha 2-3. And for how long can they keep this up? And how long can Ryan continue to push? He's only got himself a 2.5 tenth gap ahead and behind, but he is closing in ahead and losing it behind. Sixten all over the gearbox there. Trying to go for a move down the inside in corner 11 and ahead of Deha. The new mediums are working beautifully for the Williams driver. as he now comes round the 13th, now round the 14th corner, finds himself up into that top 4. So now 4 different constructors. In fact, all the way down to 8th place, we have 7 different constructors in the top 8. As we have another change in position, Deha losing another one to a medium runner behind. It is a matter of patience for the hard tyre runners. They have to wait for these mediums to drop off. Just another 7 to 12 laps before the mediums will start to seriously lose some grip, and the hards are going to have some major advantages in the later stages of this race, and that's when they can start to pounce back. 1 second gap already between P5 and P4 almost. Sixten right on the gearbox of Ryan ahead of him. Are we going to see another move down into the 11th corner? We're not, but he's certainly going to keep as close as he can. Around the final banking, Sixten trying to close that gap down. 3.5 tenths. Remaining 3.5 tenths. Not quite able to close that gap down. Leo as well, 1.5 tenths into that first corner braking zone. Couldn't quite get it around. Hassith is trying to close in. Ferrari and the Mercedes and the McLaren all fighting for P11 at the moment. And in fact going too wide, almost banging wheels. The Mercedes and the Ferrari there. And into the third corner, 3 wide almost into that banking. And the Mercedes is ahead. Ferrari maintains P12 from the McLaren just behind. As Ivan closed that gap down, back down to 3 tenths. And we're going to see, unfortunately, Sixten, after an incredible storming getaway with those fresher mediums, is actually off of the grid and rejoining, just going side by side with a Haas Huber to his left. And now coming down towards the 11th corner. Is he going to have the pace, the speed, the grip to go down the inside? He does. And around the 12th corner, he gets himself up into P6, but he's down a few places. And now he's got to catch a 1 second gap between Dehan and Ivan now. And that's going to be a lot of time for Sixten to try and close. He may have the fresher mediums. For how long, though, can he keep him up? You can see his ERS light at the back is flashing. That means he's recharging or he's below 10%. Either way, he needs to recharge as much as he can. He needs to attack. For this is his only chance to try and get back up there into a potential podium position. Yellow flag in the first sector, and I think it's for Hassith, unfortunately, a collision, possible collision between him and the AlphaTauri. As we see Candy King getting through down the inside on Stefano in that first sector. Very good move in a very tricky part of the circuit. Consider me impressed, as we're going to see now the Aston Martin, the Alfa Romeo, going too wide around that 10th corner, now coming down towards that second DRS straight into the 11th corner. The Aston Martin is in the lead of that battle, in for a podium position provisionally. 11 laps to go, and the Alfa Romeo already with a massive gap. Ryan is not quite having the grip, at least out of that corner. Ivan, of course, with those 2-lap fresher mediums, is going to have the pace advantage. At the moment, we're going to see Leo now coming down the first straight, down 2 wide, no 3 wide. The Ferrari loses not but 1 but 2 positions. The Aston Martin trying to go for the move for P1 round the outside. And has he stuck it? He has. The Aston Martin with a sensational move down the inside, then around the outside the first corner. Ivan is now up for P1, Leo up into P2, and Mark down to P3. Those mediums have worked a treat for the Aston Martin, but his light is blinking. He is out of ERS, and the question is now then, how long can he keep this up? So many questions, so few answers. Sixten trying to make his way back up the grid. A slight squirrel for the Alfa Romeo, sorry. But Sixten remains just behind. P5 for the Williams at the moment. Tough fight right now for P10 as well. F1 Kid, unfortunately, with a 3-second time penalty for track limits, is under pressure from the Mercedes behind. Tomas, both both Mercedes, apologies, qualifying in P12 and P14. And down that back straight, we then, main straight, we then see Sixton getting ahead of Ryan. Those mediums now, he's trying to recover as much as he can. He's got to get up to the top of the field. And a quick look again at the tyres. He's got 2 hard runners at the front, just 1 medium runner behind. All eyes at the front of the grid, because this is where it's going to get interesting in the next 9 laps. Go a flag in that first sector again. Tim Bayer, after a very unfortunate start for the Aston Martin, his teammate currently in the lead of this race, is just struggling in that second sector. 26 lap old hards, certainly a painful, certainly a race full of misery at the moment, as we see Ivan losing the lead of this race. Ludo with the DRS advantage down that back main straight manages to regain the lead of this race. Our original race leader still in P3, but now 8 lap old mediums. We're slowly reaching that region of dead tires, or at least losing grip tires. Around 30 to 35% tire wear, you will start to feel the loss of grip. It's not until you reach around 50 to 60% do you really then have to pit before the tire wear degradation will increase dramatically, and 75 is where you do not want to be, because 75 is the marker for the puncture territory. Puncture is then end the game for any of these drivers. So far, keeping it very clean. So far, I don't think anyone but, at the moment, Tim Bayer in P18 in that risk of a puncture, potentially already in that puncture territory. We'll have to take a look. He has got a puncture. Rear left. Speak of punctures. And unfortunately, you can see the race leader is now lapping P18 as he goes to the pits. And we'll have to see Leo still maintaining lead of the race, covering that inside line. Ivan not able to quite pounce on the battle ahead of him. Alpine now getting ahead of Tim Alders down the inside in that first corner. Banking is better around the outside, but the inside line is the preferred line for most of these drivers. Trying to block that turn in and get their nose ahead before the exit. Tim Bayer onto fresh softs, potentially trying to go for that fastest lap after a very unfortunate start. We'll have to see what he can do. Fastest laps are currently a 1:10.4, so without a doubt, very much possible to be stolen, but unfortunately will not be scored, as he is outside of the top 10. Currently a DRS train, P1 through to P6, and then DRS train between P9 and through to P11, as we're going to see the Red Bull and the Mercedes going too wide around the 13th corner. Now out of the 14th corner, the 2 Mercedes are going to go too wide down that back straight. Both of them are blinking out of ERS. The Red Bull leads the Silver Arrows into that first corner, and it's going to be a battle of the arrows. Who's going to be able to come out ahead? As Sixton again, for the second time in this race, has had a spin and is back down to P7. It is now an Alfa Romeo 1-4, and Sixton just not quite finding his grip, not able to maintain the medium tyres, perhaps under the pressure of hot air from the drivers ahead of him, and just losing that grip, unfortunately. 6 laps remaining. No virtual safety cars, no safety cars at all. Just a couple of yellow flags. And 1 driver with a time penalty, F1 kid with a 3-second time penalty, entering the pits and getting it for exceeding track limits, multiple warnings. Going to see a battle now. Again, Ivan and Mark, the top three, are just all going to continue to fight it out. The mediums still clearly have the pace. Now the inside line for the second corner into the third corner. The inside line for the third corner is where the pace is at. And Ivan, once trying to go for a move for P2, is now trying to defend for P3. As Ryan is slowly closing in 4 tenths behind, trying to get up there and help his teammate out for P1. Slight snap of oversteer there for the Alfa Romeo, but it keeps it under control. Now the second DRS straight into the 11th corner, 12th corner next. He's going to continue up this pace as Sixten gets round again ahead of the Alpines. The second time in this race where he's had a mistake or an error. And unfortunately has had to climb his way from P8 or higher up into the top 4, sorry. And now he's just got 2 positions to gain, but it's 3 seconds to the drivers ahead, and he's on those old mediums, which are now going to certainly have a disadvantage to the hard tyre runners around him. 4 laps to go, and I cannot say with good confidence who our race winners or who our podium sitters will be, as we're going to have a lot of battles, and we're going to see Brian, in fact, close in that gap to the Aston Martin ahead. Tim Bayer, there you go, with the fastest lap, a 109.921. As I said, it is certainly possible, and he takes that. Unfortunately, no extra point for him, but as I said, I can't predict the race winners or the podium finishes because Ryan is in the mix. We're going to see Ivan now with a helicopter cam. Ivan trying to go for a move on the Ferrari ahead of him. And Mark able to just get a good enough exit. Defend now into 11, round through 12. And now, as we're going to approach the line after these couple last corners for the 33rd lap of this race around Zandvoort, who is going to be able to come out on top? As the gap is 4 tenths for each of them. Huber 2 tenths behind. Sixten just continuing to lose time, unfortunately. 3.5 seconds now. Lost half a second in this previous lap. And I think his race for the top 5 potentially could be out of it, though I'm not going to say it is, because time penalties are still a huge factor. Driver errors are still a huge factor, but no safety cars or virtual safety cars are possible now, as we've hit that 3-lap window where it is, as far as I'm aware, impossible for them to come out. Mark trying to get some clean air down the inside into that first corner. Perhaps trying to cool off his tyres. Those hards have been running for quite a few laps. He's got a medium runner behind him. But we're certainly now into that. I thought there was going to be contact between the Aston Martin there and the Ferrari. Very close between them. But fortunately, just stopping in time. The Aston Martin keeping control. Really had me worried there. I certainly thought there was going to be contact in that third corner. But no, the Ferrari continues on for P2. Ivan on for P3. Ryan for P4. And Huber for P5. Mark losing 7 tenths to the drivers ahead of him, but Ivan is now 1.5 tenths. He's close enough. The DRS train is not going to make a huge difference. He's going to try and close that gap down, but instead it's going to be the Ferrari closing that gap down. And unfortunately, Ivan not quite close enough. I thought he was, but the Ferrari clearly had the pace and clearly had the ERS. as Max now receives a 5-second time penalty going into the pits and retires from the session, just 2 laps away from the end of this race. And unfortunately now we'll not see the checkered flag, as we have Ryan all over the gearbox of the Aston Martin. 2 laps, 1.5 laps to go, and this train of cars are all so close packed together. A lot can still happen. 4 sectors remaining. Our race leader continues strong. 7.5 tenths now is his gap to the drivers behind. And he has 1 racing lap remaining. 1 lap remaining. And we will be able to see if he will maintain it. We're going to see Ryan trying to go for a move. Aston Martin moving to the inside to defend his podium position. Ryan, unfortunately, not able to just get around. That is it. This is going to be the last first sector for him to try and get through. Aston Martin to the inside. Alfa Romeo not quite getting the traction that he needs. Second sector next. A couple of overtaking opportunities. He does have that DRS straight, but it's going to be a DRS train. And we've already seen for the entire duration of this race, it is very hard to get through and ahead of the driver in a DRS train. And you can already see the Aston Martin is blinking. If we have a quick look, actually, we've got Ryan at 10% ERS. Penultimate lap, the absolute final lap. We have a yellow flag at the end of the grid in P13. That's Stefano for the Ferrari. Now onto P4. I don't think Ryan will quite have the pace to be able to get ahead. Leo now with a 1-second gap. No threat of DRS behind. Mark is now going to be under pressure. 4 tenths though. The DRS straight will not be enough. Is now Leo crosses the line to win the Zandvoort Grand Prix. Mark with a P2 finish. Well deserved. Ivan up into P4. If we have a look at the position changes, he gains a position. Leo up 2. Ryan up 6 places for P4. Kuba for P5. Sixton, unfortunate race for the Williams driver, spinning twice already and is down into P6. The 2 Alpines, a point double scoring position for the team. P7 and P8 for Deha and Elliott. Tim Alders in P9 and Tomas for P10. Unfortunately, F1 Kid with that 3-second time penalty entering the pits and receiving 3 seconds for exceeding track limits multiple times is then demoted out of the points. And that is your top 10, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, we lost Max in this race. Literally 2 laps or 1.5 laps ago. Dived into the pits and retired there. A very unfortunate ending for the Haas driver. But that has been Zandvoort. 36 laps of some of the most exciting battles I've seen. But I have to say, without a doubt, that was impressive. The drivers keeping so close together for so long in a massive DRS train, alternating strategies for the lot of them. But we can only ever have one winner, and that goes to Leo. An incredible drive for him. And I was thoroughly impressed indeed, though I can't quite choose who my driver of the day would be. A lot of drivers excelled, a lot of drivers really showed their colours and said they can do this. Ryan, I would say Ryan gets it, but I'm not too certain, honestly. I think if I had to choose someone, I would have to choose Ryan, without a doubt. I mean, 10th place to 4th place, incredible drive. Congratulations to him. But I think everyone is a driver of the day. They managed to keep up that train so close and so tight together. Fastest lap also goes then to, I think it was to Tim Bayers in P16, no, P17. Unfortunately, outside of that top 10, does not score that extra point, but still deserves a crisp high 5, an incredible lap on those fresh, soft compound tyres. And that will be the end of this round. I believe that was round 10 for season 15 WOR. And that was an incredible race by all the drivers on the grid. Thank you everyone for joining me, and thank you WR for giving me this opportunity to do this commentating. I hope to be back again. We'll have to see. And thank you all. This will be the